So as far as object selection goes, I have this panel of buttons up here. So just the regular pointer is going to allow me to go around and select different objects. And then this four-way pointer here allows me to move objects. So when I have this selected, I have my different movement options over here. And this took me a little while to figure out at first. But so if I have X selected, it is only going to allow me to move this object in the X plane. Likewise with Y, I can only move this in the Y plane, and Z, the same, Z plane. Now XY, you can lock on the XY plane like this and move around it just in the XY plane, which is sometimes pretty helpful. And then you have these two other ones over here. You have your follow terrain, which allows me to just move this over any terrain there is. So if there was a hill over here, it would automatically move up on top of the hill. And then follow terrain and snap to objects is going to, so like if I have a building built and I have the floor of that building or something and I have this selected, it would automatically move the piano up onto the floor where I'm pointing. So that's helpful if you're like building a room or something like that. Or if you need one object to be on top of another, and that way it'll automatically go up. So you'll also notice that you have a basic snap to grid here, and you can select the resolution of snapping. So over here, our third option is angles and rotating. So you can see it now brings up kind of an angled rotating grid, and there's three angles at which I can rotate around. And getting this to work properly is a little bit of a trick at first. So you'll notice up here, whichever way I want to rotate, I want to highlight over that axis on the little pointers here. So if I want to rotate around the Y-axis, I want to hover my mouse over Y and then click, and then dragging up and down is going to rotate that properly. Likewise, with X and Z, if I hover over X and Z, it is going to rotate that object accordingly. And that took a little bit of figuring out at first. All right. Let's see. The next thing I want to talk about is the roll-up bar over here. So you'll notice that I have this standard bar over here that lets me do pretty much everything in the game. So your first one is going to be, like basic objects placing. You can place AI. Anything you need to place on the map is going to be over here. And then I have my terrain roll-up bar, so it allows me to go in and place vegetation and environment type stuff. Then over here I have kind of my environment and AI, and I'm going to go over these a lot more in detail later in the series, but just as some basic layout. And then your layers viewer, and this is kind of just like any layers would work, like say in Photoshop or something like that. If I want a new layer, I'll create one, and I can place objects in different layers, and I can import and export layers. And sometimes that's the easiest way to share around map stuff, is to place all the objects you have in one layer, and then you can share it with a partner and just email him that layer, and he can import it, he or she, and that makes it pretty easy for sharing. Another thing that is really helpful, sometimes you'll get a map that has just tons and tons of objects on it. Once you've built a really complex map and you can't find something, and it's a little bit difficult to select an object, if you go up here and you search in this bar, so if I want to select my grand piano, I can just start typing grand piano, and it's going to select anything that has grand in its name. So right now I only have this one object, but that was a really easy way to select that object. So you can see if I was lost in the distance up here and I couldn't find my grand piano, I would just type in grand. Oh, there it is. It's selected. Cool. Also notice that we have this little button up here in the corner. If I select it, it's going to show me more information about objects. And this is a poor example right now because the grand piano doesn't have any other information. But when dealing with cameras and stuff, this will show where the camera's looking and stuff like that, and is very helpful. Let's see, the last couple things I need to talk about in this video are over here under perspective. If you right click on this, it's going to give you a bunch of different options. a couple of the first ones, you have wireframe and point mode. Wireframe is going to put you in this really basic kind of CAD interface almost, where you just have all wireframe and it's going to render really smoothly because it doesn't have to render all the graphics, and you can kind of mess around and manipulate objects. And, it's a lot more smooth. So if your computer has some problems rendering the graphics, wireframe can be very helpful, as well as point mode. And point mode, is similar to wireframe, but even less complex. A couple other things. There's some interesting options in here to play around with. I've never really used a lot of them. The next interesting thing is under view, you can select your view, so like top view, front view, and those are pretty basic. And perspective view is the one that is, just our basic view. Perspective view is the one that we usually use. And also under view, you will be able to, once you create cameras and things like that, there's going to be an option under here for camera one, so like when I create my first camera, and I'll go over this in a lot more detail later, but I can now see that I have these camera options here under this right-click menu here. And so default camera is obviously our perspective view. But if you want to look at a different camera, you're just going to click camera 1, and you can see that's what our camera 1 sees. Not much. Pretty poorly placed camera. The last thing that I want to go over in these videos is being able to jump into your map and see what things are happening. And there's two ways to do this. So one of the things we have is this AI/physics button down here. So if you have artificial intelligence objects or physics objects in your map and you want to see what they do, you can select this button and it will run. And right now it's kind of bugging out and doing this funky thing because I have this weird gun placed over here. But when you select this, any AI that you have on your map are going to do their artificial intelligence things. They're going to run around, talk to each other, whatever they do. And any physics props you have are going to start doing their physics things. So if you have an object that's supposed to fall and crash, that object is going to fall and crash when physics is selected. So I'm going to turn that off. The other option we have is pressing the keys Control-G. And so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Control-G actually drops you into the map as a player, and I can run around and look at things. And sometimes this gets really helpful because you can just kind of snoop around and see how things look. And Control-G will also run AI and physics as well. And, I can even, I can shoot up my piano here if I want. Not very useful, but it is a lot of fun. And so then to get out of Control-G, I'm just going to hit Escape and go back in. So it's a very easy way to drop in and see what things are going to happen. All right, I don't think there's any other interface things that I want to go over in this video. So I'm going to go ahead and bid you goodbye, and in the next video we'll talk about things that you'll probably find a lot more useful.